Dr. Anthony Fauci is on Capitol Hill today and tomorrow. Lawmakers probing the former director of the National Institutes of Health on his response to COVID-19. His testimony expected to take several hours with hundreds of questions already prepared. NTD's Melina Wisecup joins us now live from Capitol Hill with an update. So, Melina, what are lawmakers trying to pry out of Fauci, and have you heard from anybody who's been there today?
So, Steve, the main focus of today's closed-door testimony from Anthony Fauci is to try to assess the United States response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The lawmakers that we heard from coming in and out of today's hearing is that they haven't really gotten to the questions that they want to get to yet. Instead, they focus more on the process and how the U.S. could respond differently during the next pandemic. But we do know there is more that those lawmakers do want to get into, specifically about Fauci's role, like his flip-flop stance on the mask mandate, as well as funding that went from his department at the time through EcoHealth, then to fund research in China. When I spoke to Chairman Winstrup about halfway through today's hearing, he had a very calm demeanor, and he actually said that Fauci had been cooperative with the questions that the lawmakers had presented so far. But another lawmaker we heard from said that they haven't gotten to the hard questions yet, like this one.
U.S. funding that made its way to the Wuhan lab. I think that's incredibly important. And any suppression of the lab leak theory, that's really important. Not only did NIH funding make its way to the Wuhan lab, but that USAID, Department of State, Department of Defense. And the question is why? What were they using that money for? Were they conducting gain-of-function research?
So as this hearing drags on, there will be more focus on questions just like that one. They started today at 10 a.m. and they'll leave not until 7 p.m. tonight, so very long days here, and then back again tomorrow for a second round of questioning for several hours. Now, this isn't a typical type of hearing where you see a lot of focus on the back and forth between the witnesses and now the Republican-led House. Instead, it's interesting to look at how Republicans are handling this. Instead, it looks like they're prioritizing what information they can get out of Fauci in a closed-door private setting. Steve?
So, Melina, certainly a lot going on this week on the Hill there as Congress gets back to work. House Republicans today also took the next step to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress for failing to appear for his closed-door deposition last month. What can you tell us?
So two committees that are leading this investigation into the Biden family's business dealings, the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee, today they released a resolution to actually move forward to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress. Now, remember, these are the two committees that are two of the three committees that are actually leading now the impeachment proceedings into President Biden and his possible relationship with those business dealings. Now, remember, the reason why these committees are doing this is because Hunter Biden defied the subpoena last month. He didn't show up for that closed-door deposition. Instead, he did show up here to Capitol grounds and held a press conference right outside instead of showing up. And the co-chairmen of these committees say that that was a flagrant defiance of the committees, which is why they're moving forward with this contempt of Congress, with these contempt of Congress proceedings now. And they'll be marking up the resolution in committee this Wednesday, and then later they'll move on to a full floor House vote on this.
And today's Melina Wisecup with a live report from Capitol Hill. Thank you, Melina. During a campaign speech in South Carolina today, President Biden honoring the lives lost at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston. That was where a shooter gunned down 9 black worshipers in 2015.
The word of God was pierced by bullets and hate, of rage, propelled by not just gunpowder, but by a poison. What is that poison? White supremacy. This has no place in America. Not today, tomorrow, or ever.
In the middle of Biden's speech, a number of pro-Palestinian protesters interrupted him by calling for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The president in turn said that he's been working with the Israeli government to get troops out of Gaza. Worth noting, South Carolina is a major battleground state for Democratic candidates. Back in 2020, black voters helped turn around Biden's campaign, securing him a win in the state's Democratic primary. A staggering 92% of black voters across the United States supported Biden during the last election. But a recent New York Times poll suggesting that the momentum is taking a downturn. 22% of black voters now are leaning toward former President Trump. Meanwhile, in New York City, police have arrested more than 300 people following a pro-Palestinian rally earlier today. Demonstrators blocked off morning traffic at several major roadways in and out of Manhattan, including the Holland Tunnel, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, and also the Williamsburg. And Trump today moving to have the 2020 election case in Georgia thrown out on grounds of presidential immunity. That's as he toggles between the courtroom and the campaign trail in Iowa. Joining us now live from Iowa is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. Tell us about Trump's latest legal move today.
Good evening to you, Steve. Former President Trump today moved to dismiss the election interference charges against him in Georgia, claiming that he has presidential immunity protection. He on Truth Social wrote that he was looking for voter fraud and that is part of his obligation as the president. He also warned that if he doesn't get presidential immunity, President Biden would be, quote, ripe for indictment over the border crisis. Meanwhile, Trump is also using the legal challenges currently facing him to get more support from voters. Here's what he told us over the weekend in a campaign stop in Iowa. Watch.
You think anybody else could get up here and speak to you all day and get indicted 4 times and have you 9 trials against them? All fake trials? Nobody else. Nobody else.
But other GOP candidates are arguing that Trump's legal troubles make his campaign all about himself. We just talked to Republican Congressman Chip Roy, who's here in Iowa campaigning for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Here's what he said. Watch.
And, you know, all of these cases are being politically motivated, directed at him. But it's still there. It's still real. You know, as Governor DeSantis says, you know, President Trump is running on his issues.
And Trump is set to appear for oral arguments in the D.C. election interference case tomorrow on Tuesday, and which is also claiming presidential immunity. And this Thursday, Trump's also due in a courtroom in New York, and that's another trial that he's facing. And that's before he comes back to Iowa this upcoming weekend for more campaign stops. So he's really going back and forth between the courtroom and a campaign trial this week. Steve.
Well, Iris, it certainly seems like Trump has a packed schedule this week. What about other presidential candidates out there? What are they doing in Iowa?
So DeSantis, Ramaswamy, and Nikki Haley are all campaigning in Iowa this week. But notably, Nikki Haley had to cancel one of her campaign stops this morning, citing an upcoming snowstorm. Meanwhile, Ramaswamy criticized her for doing that, saying that she's doing it to avoid embarrassment for low turnout. Meanwhile, Ramaswamy and DeSantis are both having their wives campaigning for them today in Iowa. And we just talked to the wife of Ramaswamy earlier this morning, and she talked to us about the values that First Lady should have. Watch.
Really caring about freedom, but also ideals of virtue and being that family that cares about the nuclear family, the importance of that I think is such an important role for the First Lady.
Here at this hotel in Iowa, where Casey DeSantis, the First Lady of Florida, is campaigning for her husband, where she's talking to us about the accomplishments by DeSantis in Florida and the accomplishments that he might have as president. So we do expect to see more presidential candidates themselves, as well as their families, all campaigning in Iowa in this upcoming week. Steve.
Iris, we can see that snow starting to come down right behind you out the window there. Stay safe. NTD's Iris Tao reporting live from Iowa. Thank you. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.